Hello, and thank you for being with me again. The gospel I've been reading this week is the piece in which Jesus says you cannot serve both God and money. And this has given rise to an almost vilifying of money in some circles, which is not really correct. I'm pretty sure I said in a previous talk that whereas a lot of people would say that Jesus opted for the poor, I would contest that, because if we look at a lot of the events that are spoken about in Jesus' life, wealthy people are involved. We hear about him going to eat with Zacchaeus, who was a publican and was able to give back 4 times what he'd stolen from anyone. We hear about Joseph of Arimathea burying his body in a tomb that he'd bought for himself, and so on. And so there are many cases, miracles too, where Jesus worked miracles for the chief of a synagogue. He worked a miracle for a centurion. And so he wasn't only concerned with poor people. There's also the misconception that money is evil. And money is certainly not evil. It's the incorrect use of money that is the problem. When we give it importance that is not correct for it, that's a problem. And so what Jesus is actually talking about is he's saying you cannot serve both God and money. Meaning, when I have to make a decision, how do I decide what to do? Is my decision based on Christ's teaching? Or is my decision based on what it's going to cost me? How much advantage or disadvantage I'll have from a particular deal? And this is where we can see our difference. As I say, money itself is something that even Jesus had to deal with, and we know that in the gospel it says that Judas Iscariot was the one who looked after the common fund for all of them. And we know that they celebrated Passover, they did various things, and obviously they needed money along the way, as we all do. So what is important is, if I look at where does the problem come in then with money? The problem comes in when the importance of money is exaggerated. And we're all a bit guilty of this, actually. You know, when a really wealthy person comes along, we'll often treat them differently from a very poor person. And this is something that Jesus deals with directly in the gospel, saying that that's not right. And even though we know it's not right, it's so much part of our culture often that we do find it happening. You see, our society is built on money, and developing success is often measured by how much money you can make. And we even have a case, for example, of where one person can earn way more, thousands of times more than another person for the same number of hours of work. And this surely goes against God's plan, because we cannot possibly say that the time of one person is worth that much more than the time of another person. So what can you do? Well, the fact is, if you happen to have a profession that attracts a high salary, if you went along and said to your employer, look, I don't want such a high salary, I want a lower salary, they'd be only too happy to give you a lower salary. But that wouldn't solve the problem. And so what we can do is, if we are in a position where we're fortunate, we have financial resources, we have, as I say, a profession that can earn us good money, we need to look at what we do with that money that we earn. And so if I earned a very high salary, what would be important is, do I look to use a good part of that salary for those who are less fortunate, for those who attract a much lower salary? And that's where we can see whether our decision is based on Christ's teaching or on money. Because you see, even if I'm able to attract a high salary, those gifts that put me in that position are gifts from God, they're not mine. We know that from the medical field that there are many things that the medical field cannot solve, many illnesses, many disabilities, and so on. And there are things that some of us are good at and some of us are not good at. And this shows us how it's not our decision what we can and can't do and how well we can and can't do it. It's based on the gift from God and what He makes it possible for us to do. And so what the problem is with God and money is not money as such, but it's remembering to put God first and saying, first of all, I should see those around me who are less fortunate as being equal to me. Even if I can attract a lot more money than they can, that doesn't make me better or higher than them. They're still people like I am. And so I need to use my money wisely. And so you could say the more money you have, the more responsibility you have for what you do with that money. And that is very true. Because even if I were to win a lot of money, for example, on a lottery or something, I would need to look and say, what can I do with this money? How should I spend it? Where should I put it that will be of most use to other people as well? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a comfortable life and we shouldn't have some of the things we want. It's when we go overboard and we have an excessive wealth and excessive capacity to spend money where other people don't have what they really need for living. That's where the problem comes in. And so what my call is in this talk is to consider just how much you are able to accumulate, how much you do have available, and look around you and see who you can help that is less fortunate than you. And then your balance would be correct. If, however, you're only looking at whatever you earn and whatever comes your way as being yours, and nobody's going to take any of it from you, well, then money is your God, and that is the problem. Because that leads to selfishness, it leads to competition, it leads to arguments, it leads to all the other difficulties that wealth can bring. And my prayer for you is that you will handle your finances wisely according to God's will in your life and be able to do a huge amount of good with what you do have. And may God bless you. Thank you.